Rhaegar Targaryen killed Robert Baratheon at the Trident. The rebel armies have been routed. Ned Stark is a prisoner. Tywin Lannister bows his head. The throne is secure. House Dragon remains in power. It would seem the perfect outcome for those who have always sympathized with the last prince. But here is a question that, for some reason, is rarely asked. What happens next? What happens to the Mad King, to Elia Martell and her children, to Lyanna Stark and her newborn son Jon? What is done with the losers? Westeros does not become a better place in this version of the story. It simply becomes different, and in some respects, perhaps, much worse. Today we'll follow this chain of events from the first domino to fall right through to the very end. We'll see who wins, who loses, whether Lyanna survives, whether Rhaegar is actually ruling well, and what becomes of the threat looming from the north, a threat that no victory at the Trident can avert. Come closer, because the aftermath of a single death is spreading across all of Westeros, and the outcome will surprise you. Before we develop an alternative, let's establish the turning point. It is important for us to understand not just what happened, but why it happened exactly that way and no other. Otherwise, we cannot develop an alternative. Every assumption must be grounded in the characters' personalities and the logic of the world, rather than in a desire to come up with a neat storyline. The 283rd year after the conquest, Prince Rhaegar Targaryen gathered the remnants of the Loyalist forces and marched north. 40,000 men, including 10,000 Dornishmen under the command of Prince Lewin Martell, advanced to meet the united rebel forces at the Trident Fords. The rebel army was smaller, numbering some 35,000, but had been through several battles. Rhaegar's men were fresher, but had not seen a single battle in this war. Rhaegar himself had spent most of it with Lyanna Stark in the Tower of Joy in the mountains of Dorne. The battle raged with fluctuating fortunes. On the rebels' left flank, the Dornish under Lovin's command threatened to break through until Lyn Corbray seized the sword of her wounded father, Lady Solitary, and led an attack that shattered the Dornish formation. Lewin was killed. Barristan Selmy, defending the Loyalists' right flank, fought so fiercely that he killed, by various estimates, more than a dozen enemies before he was knocked from his horse and taken away wounded. But it was neither the maneuver nor the flank that proved decisive. The decisive moment came when Rhaegar and Robert clashed in single combat in the shallows. The hammer shattered the ruby breastplate. Rhaegar fell. The rubies scattered across the water. The ford has been called Ruby Ford ever since. With Rhaegar's death, his army fell apart. Robert was wounded and handed command over to Ned Stark. Tywin Lannister, who had been waiting at Casterly Rock throughout the war, marched on the capital at the opportune moment. Entering through the gates under the guise of allies of the crown, his soldiers sacked the city. The Mad King was killed by Jaime. Elia Martell and her children were killed by Gregor Clegane on Tywin's orders. Robert took the throne. Lyanna died in the Tower of Joy after giving birth. The Targaryens lost everything. Here's our vantage point: the Trident. Rhaegar strikes first. Robert's hammer misses. A moment later, Robert Baratheon is dead. What is changing? At first it seems very little. The battle is still raging. The armies stand their ground. Ned commands the rebels. But beneath the surface picture, something else begins to unfold immediately. For Robert Baratheon is not merely a commander. He is the heart and soul of the rebellion. When he fell at the Trident, the news spread across the field faster than any messenger. Among the rebel soldiers, something began that kills armies more surely than any spear: uncertainty. Who were they fighting for, if not Robert? For justice? For the honor of the Starks? These words sound fine in the speeches of lords. On the wet field by the river, with their leader's corpse at their feet, they mean less than a sip of water. It was he who personally slew the enemies. It was his charisma that held the scattered lords together. It was his Targaryen blood that gave the whole venture legal cover. Without him, the war for the crown loses its chief contender. Ned Stark does not want the throne. He never did. Jon Arryn is old. Hoster Tully joined for the sake of blood ties, not out of idealism. Rhaegar understands this. That is precisely why he set out to kill Robert himself, rather than simply win the battle. But before we go any further in developing this alternative, we need to consider one important fact that most analyses tend to overlook. What did Rhaegar actually plan to do with power? Had he obtained it? This is not a rhetorical question. The answer lies in the canon. Before leaving King's Landing, Rhaegar told Jaime Lannister that he intended to convene the Great Council and deal with his father, a direct quote from A Storm of Swords. The prince intended to discuss what to do about the Mad King. This is direct evidence, not a theory. Rhaegar knew that Aerys was mad. He knew that his reign was destroying the Seven Kingdoms, and he had a plan. Victory gave him the opportunity to carry out that plan. And that means the first move in our version of history is not merely a military victory. It is the beginning of reform from above. There is another important point to consider. Around the year 281, when the famous tournament at Harrenhal was held, Rhaegar had in fact organized it specifically to gather the great lords in one place and encourage them to form an informal Great Council, which would force Aerys to accept the regency or abdicate. Varys warned the Mad King, and he personally attended the tournament, ruining the whole scheme. Rhaegar realized that, whilst his father was alive, reform was impossible without military force behind him. The war gave him that power. Now, having won, he could finally finish what he had begun at Harrenhal, and that changes absolutely everything. Rhaegar has won. Robert is dead. The next few weeks will decide everything. The first thing the victorious prince must do is end the war. Unless the main claimant is dead, the rebellion technically continues. Ned Stark commands the remnants of the rebel army. He has lost his brother Brandon and his father Rickard, both executed by the Mad King. Ned took up arms not out of political ambition, but out of grief and loyalty to Robert. Robert is dead. Who is there to fight now? It is important to understand Rhaegar's reasoning here. He is not the punitive type. Everyone who describes him emphasizes that he sought justice, not revenge. Executing every lord who raised a sword is impossible, both practically and politically. If he kills Ned, the North will erupt once more. If he beheads Jon Arryn, the Vale will erupt. Rhaegar is clever enough to realize that a war is won only when the defeated cease to seek revenge. And that means terms of peace are needed, which at the very least preserve the Lord's dignity. Most likely, an oath of allegiance in exchange for retaining their lands. Ned Stark returns to Winterfell, perhaps stripped of some of his borderlands as punishment, but alive and with a life sentence. Hoster Tully agrees immediately. Jon Arryn does too. Both are elderly, both are weary of war, both have lost men and money, and both realize that with Robert's body, the rebellion has become pointless. The situation with Stannis Baratheon is more complicated. He held Storm's End throughout the entire war. He never opened the gates. His brother is dead. If Rhaegar spares Stannis, he will be sparing a man whose sole desire now is revenge. If he executes him, he will be violating the very principle upon which the entire world is built. Most likely, Stannis will be sent to the Wall or into exile. That is not a solution. It is a problem put on hold. But we can talk about problems put on hold later. What's happening to Tywin Lannister? This is perhaps the most intriguing twist. In the canon, Tywin arrived just as the rebels' victory became clear, sacked the city, and was rewarded with Cersei's marriage to Robert. Here, Rhaegar's victory throws his calculations into disarray. There is nothing left to wait for. The victor has been decided, and Tywin, who has never supported the losing side, comes to Rhaegar with a bow, the wealth of Casterly Rock, the army of the West, the stability of the trade routes. He lays all this on the table. It is important to understand that Tywin did not simply maintain neutrality out of cowardice. He bided his time because he harbored specific grievances against both sides. Aerys had humiliated him by refusing Cersei's marriage to Rhaegar and appointing Jaime to the Kingsguard, effectively depriving Tywin of an heir. The rebels, meanwhile, were strangers with unfamiliar ambitions. He had no reason to side with either of them, only calculation. A victory for Rhaegar meant that Tywin would have to integrate himself into the new order in the most advantageous way possible. His trump card, as usual, was the gold of Casterly Rock and the military might of the Westerlands. Rhaegar agrees, not out of affection, but out of pragmatism. Tywin is too powerful to ignore and too dangerous to offend. But at what cost? In the canon, Tywin ended up with Cersei as his queen. Here, Rhaegar is already married to Lyanna. Cersei does not become queen. She remains the Lord's unmarried daughter, albeit the richest in Westeros. Tywin gets money, a seat on the council, perhaps the post of Hand of the King, which he held for 20 years and which he regards as rightfully his own, but not a crown for his bloodline. It is a wound that will never heal, the outcome of the first move. The war is over. The rebels have been subdued. The Lannisters are at court, but without the throne. Rhaegar is preparing to settle the score with his father. So far, everything seems under control. But this is where the real reckoning begins. Stannis Baratheon deserves a special mention, as he is one of the few characters whose fate in our version of the story is fundamentally worse than in the canon. In the canon, he survived it all, became King of the North for a short time, and made a real contribution to the war against the Boleyns. Here, his role is rendered meaningless even before it begins. His brother is killed. The rebellion is crushed. He lives either in exile or under light supervision in his Storm's End, with Rhaegar's permission, as a perpetual, silent threat. But Stannis is a man of unshakable convictions regarding duty and justice. He will never forgive. He will never forget. His children, if he has any, will inherit this memory along with his estate. And one day, in 20 or 30 years' time, this blood will make itself felt once more. The Baratheons have not disappeared. They are simply biding their time. The Mad King is alive. Rhaegar has returned victorious, and now he possesses political capital that he lacked before the war. The Great Council he spoke of to Jaime is becoming a reality. The lords of Westeros are weary of Aerys. Rhaegar is popular. The conditions for reform are in place. But Aerys is unpredictable. He burned people alive, listened to the whispers of spies, and saw conspiracies where there were none. His paranoia reached such a level that he ordered the royal docks to be booby-trapped with wildfire in case of a takeover. In the canon, it was precisely this order that drove Jaime to kill him. In our version, Rhaegar must remove him from power before he has a chance to give the order to set the city alight. It is a delicate operation. To give his father the trappings of power while stripping him of any real authority. To place him under supervision. To persuade enough lords to vote for a regency. Jaime finds himself at the center of this story once again. He knows about the wildfire. He saw a Geralt Hightower go up in flames for a single careless word. He has sworn the oath of the Kingsguard and knows that it binds him. If Rhaegar acts quickly enough, Jaime won't have to make that choice again. If he hesitates, history will repeat itself, only differently. Let us assume that Rhaegar handles this transition smoothly. Aerys is deposed, lives under house arrest, and dies in his bed a few years later. Rhaegar is officially crowned. The first year of his reign, historically speaking, is likely to be a good one. He is educated, diplomatic, and knows how to inspire trust. Barristan Selmy, whom he spared after the Trident, serves him faithfully. The Grand Maester is at his side. The small council is functioning, but there is one problem that no ruler's talent alone can solve. That problem is called Alia Martell. So, Rhaegar emerges victorious at Trident, returns to King's Landing, and deposes his father. Let's assume everything went smoothly. But now he's left holding a country with open wounds that need to be healed all at once. The Maester of the Citadel must be sworn in. The small council needs to be reconstituted. Who should be on it? Varys remains, because Varys always remains and finds his place at any court. Pycelle probably too, for it was he who opened the gates for Tywin in the canon, convincing the Mad King of the Lannisters' good intentions. But in our version, the gates did not open, and Pycelle remains the master-at-arms, albeit somewhat tainted by his past loyalty to Aerys. Littlefinger, the young Petyr Baelish, is only just beginning his career at this point. In the canon, it was Robert's chaos that gave him room for maneuver. Here, there is less chaos. His rise, if it happens at all, will take a different path. Rhaegar appoints the Hand. Who? Probably Tywin, because there is no better administrator in the Seven Kingdoms. and everyone knows it. Rhaegar is clever enough to recognize another's skill, even if the man is unpleasant. Tywin is pragmatic enough to make himself indispensable once more. This is no idol. It is a political marriage of convenience. Tywin will be effective and will build his influence. Rhaegar will be aware of this and will keep a close watch. A silent war for the small council will immediately begin between them. Elia is alive. Her children, Rhaenys and Aegon, are alive. And the Martells know this. Rhaegar annulled his first marriage in order to marry Lyanna. It is important to pause here. In the books, this detail has not yet been definitively confirmed. We have only seen the annulment scene in the series at the Sept of Dorne, and the book version of Rhaegar remains a more ambiguous character in this regard. But if we take the TV version as the basis for our scenario, then from Daenerys' vision in the House of the Undying, we know Rhaegar believed that his children by Elia had already fulfilled their part in the prophecy of the three-headed dragon. The third head, the one who bears within him both the blood of fire and the blood of ice, was meant to be Jon. But that is prophetic logic. Political logic is different, and it cannot be ignored. For Dorne, the annulment of a marriage is an unprecedented insult. Elia bore Rhaegar 2 children. She faithfully fulfilled every expectation placed upon her. She was a devoted princess, and her husband simply annulled her, as if she were an inconvenient piece of paper. In Dorne, this is met with smiles at ceremonies and poison in cups at night. Oberyn Martell, who in the canon was burning with a desire to take revenge on the Lannisters, will here direct that fury elsewhere, not at the Lannisters, at Rhaegar. What is the status of Rhaenys and Aegon? If the annulment is legally valid, strictly speaking, they are not legitimate heirs. But strictly speaking, in Westeros often means the very thing people will be fighting over for the next 50 years. Their mother is alive. Their grandfather and uncle rule Dorne. Thousands of Dornish soldiers died at the Trident, fighting for the Targaryens. If Rhaegar now tells their children, "You are not heirs," Dorne will stop sending soldiers the next time they are needed. Worse, Dorne will start looking for someone to support in the next civil war, to humiliate the house that humiliated them. Rhaegar is a shrewd man. He is trying to strike a balance. Aegon, son of Elia, receives some title, lands, and recognition. Rhaenys enters into a marriage that is flattering, but not dangerous. Elia is granted a place of honor at court, or returns to Dorne with dignity. On paper, it looks like a compromise. In reality, it's a sticking plaster on an open wound. The Martells know how to wait. It's part of their character, as described in all the books. They will wait 5 years, 10, a generation, until an opportunity arises. Meanwhile, as they wait, another problem looms over the throne. The 2 children of Rhaegar and Lyanna were born with a claim that, by any logic, places them above Elia's children, provided the annulment is valid. Jon, also known as Aegon Targaryen in our version, is a prince born of ice and fire. Rhaegar made him a prophecy, but a prophecy does not seek the consent of the one in whom it believes, and the little prince grows up in a world where every other person at court either wants to use him, fears him, or hates him. This is where it gets interesting, and it's only going to get more interesting from here on. But the Martells have another card up their sleeve that is often overlooked in this analysis. Dorne did not join the 7 Kingdoms as a conquered province. Dorne joined through marriage, through an agreement, through the formula, Dorne under the Iron Throne, but with special rights. If Rhaegar violated the essence of this agreement by humiliating Elia, Dorne technically has legal grounds to call the very act of unification into question. This does not mean that Dorne will immediately declare independence. It means that whenever the throne has a disagreement with Dorne, negotiations will be conducted from a Dorne position that is slightly tougher than it was before Elia's humiliation. And over the course of a generation, this turns into a chronic conflict that never erupts into open war, but is never resolved by a quiet peace. Daenerys Targaryen is not born in a storm, nor on the run, nor on a forgotten island amidst a foreign fleet. Rhaella does not flee to Dragonstone, does not lose Viserys, nor does she die alone on the shore. Little Dany grows up in the Red Keep or on Dragonstone, with her family, with her mother, with her father, the king, with full granaries, and with a name that means something. Viserys does not become the beggar king. He grows up as a prince, albeit not the heir apparent. All that toxic mix of conceit, humiliation, and helplessness that defined him in the canon disappears. Perhaps he even becomes a perfectly normal person. A decent warrior, perhaps. A decent brother to Dennis. That sounds like good news. And from a human perspective, it is good news. But in the context of the history we know, it is a disaster. Daenerys Targaryen from the books and the series would be inconceivable without her childhood. Everything that makes her a great character stems from pain, deprivation, and an insatiable desire to reclaim what was taken from her. Her connection with the oppressed, with slaves, with the homeless. This is not an ideology. It is a personal story. Someone who grew up in luxury cannot understand slavery from the inside. They may sympathize, they may make the right choice with their head, but they lack the feeling that made Daenerys the mother of dragons. Her speeches to the slaves of Astapor worked because she spoke as one of them, even if she was dressed in silk. In our version, Daenerys is the daughter of the victorious king, a princess. She may well be intelligent, kind, and capable, but she is not the mother of dragons. She is not a liberator. She is not the sort of person who would cross the ocean with 3 dragons and an army simply because she has nothing left to lose. And what of the 3 dragons, who were the only proven weapon against the others on an army scale? In the canon, they hatched from petrified eggs in Khal Drogo's funeral pyre, following a series of unique events, including blood magic, specific conditions, and a sacrifice. None of these conditions can be replicated in peacetime Westeros. The eggs will most likely remain just that. Eggs, a decoration in the throne room, a symbol of the past. There are no living dragons. This is no minor detail. It is the central tenet of our alternative. Rhaegar won the war, but his world is gentler, safer, and weaker in the face of the only threat that truly matters. Others do not wait. Winter is coming, regardless of who sits on the Iron Throne. Craster still lives beyond the wall, in Craster's Keep. He still feeds his sons to something in the night, trading human lives for his own survival. The Night's Watch continues to decline because the system that turned it into a dumping ground for outcasts was in place long before Robert's rebellion, and would have continued under Rhaegar. The new king's reformist zeal is unlikely to reach the Wall, where sit men long forgotten by the South. A few extra shackles from the Watch's criminals will not alter the demographics of an organization to which noble houses have not sent their sons voluntarily for several centuries. Rhaegar believed in the prophecy. He knew of the prince who was promised. Perhaps he even realized that the threat from the north was real, given that he believed so fervently in the prophecies of Ashai, which speak precisely of this threat. In theory, he could have sent resources to the Night's Watch. In theory, he could have begun preparing people for the fact that beyond the wall was not empty. But practice shows that even in the canon, when the threat became obvious and real, the Southern Lords refused to believe it. Robert laughed at this. Tywin dismissed it as fairy tales. Rhaegar may have believed, but one man against the political inertia of the entire 7 kingdoms, which for several thousand years had seen the others only in legends, is not enough. In the canon, Jon Snow's journey took him from being a Stark bastard to commander of the Night's Watch. This journey would have been impossible without everything else. Without Ned's death, without the War of the 5 Kings, without that specific set of circumstances that ultimately put the right people in the right places. Without Jon's exile to the Wall, there would have been no alliance with the Wildlings, no understanding of the nature of the others, nor that massacre at Hardhome, which proved to everyone that the threat was real. In our version of the story, Aegon Targaryen, son of Rhaegar and Lyanna, grows up as a prince. He will not go to the Wall. He is not a bastard with nowhere to go. He is not a man seeking meaning beyond the political games. He has other roles, other obligations, other constraints. Rhaegar believed that Jon was the key to victory over the Long Night. The prophecy of the prince that was promised described him, but the prophecy does not explain how. It does not provide a roadmap. It simply names a man. In our version, Arya Stark grows up in Winterfell, with her father still alive. She doesn't have to endure Ned's death, or Harrenhal, or the House of the Undyings, or Braavos, or her transformation into an assassin, the Arya who killed the Night King is the product of an unimaginable amount of pain and loss. This Arya is a well-adjusted girl from the north, a good fighter perhaps, but not the sort who can walk into a hall full of death and land a single blow. A ballad of absent heroes. In a world where there is less pain, there are fewer of those whom pain has made indispensable. Rhaegar wanted to raise Jon, his son by Lyanna, as the Prince of Promise. But what does that mean in practical terms? In the canon, Jon's entire training was haphazard. He trained at Winterfell, studied under Mormont on the Wall, and fought the Wildlings. None of these stages were planned by the prophecy. It was all dictated by circumstance. In our version, Rhaegar will try to prepare his son deliberately. But prepare him for what? He knows of the long night from legends and prophecies. He knows that a hero is needed, one capable of fighting the cold darkness. But how does one train a man for a war that no one has seen for thousands of years? What weapons? What strategy? Rhaegar can provide his son with the finest sword masters. He can grant access to the Citadel's archives. He can tell him everything he knows about the prophecies. But he cannot give him what gave Jon his true forging, the experience of real survival, loss, betrayal, and returning from the dead. A prince in a palace, however well he is taught, is not the same man as a bastard who survived at the edge of the world. Let's return to the question we started with. Will the Targaryens rule forever? To begin with, let's take an honest look at what this version of the story offers. Rhaegar is an intelligent, educated, and likable king with reformist ambitions. There was no nighttime massacre. Trust in the throne has not been destroyed by the slaughter of Rhaegar's children in their nurseries. Elia is alive, which offers at least some chance of reconciliation with Dorne through negotiations. Lyanna may well be alive, which spares Rhaegar the agonizing pain of loss. Ned Stark is alive, and his sons have grown up at Winterfell. Neither the War of the Five Kings nor the Red Wedding has taken place. The first 10 to 15 years of Rhaegar's reign may well be stable, perhaps even good. He is intelligent, he wanted reforms, and he understood the weaknesses of absolute monarchy. The Grand Council he spoke of could have made governance more stable. He could have begun holding regular councils with the great lords, reduced the arbitrariness of taxation, and restored the Night's Watch, at least in part. But he has 3 heirs with competing claims. Aegon, son of Elia, whose rights are backed by Dorne. Jon, son of Lyanna, whom Rhaegar himself regarded as the chosen one. Daenerys, who, in this version, has 20 years less experience. As soon as Rhaegar grows old or falls ill, the struggle over who will inherit begins. This is no fiction. It is a structural problem that the Targaryens have repeated time and again. Maegor against Aenys' children, Rhaenys against Aegon II, Bloody Craven against his nephews. The same scenario set against different backdrops. The Martells are biding their time wisely. In 20 years' time, Oberyn, or his children, or someone with Martell money and Martell connections, will begin negotiations. They will back whichever heir offers them what they want. The status of Aegon, son of Elia, the rightful lands, perhaps a marriage. Dorne is playing the game again, only now from the inside rather than the outside. The Lannisters with Tywin, who has nothing to offer Rhaegar but gold, will gradually begin to seek leverage through the small council. Tywin has thought in terms of generations all his life. He has outlived 3 kings. He will wait until Rhaegar weakens, and then propose the right man for the right place. That is his game. He knows how to play it, the Northmen. Ned Stark will die a natural death at Winterfell. His sons, Robb, Bran, and Rickon, will grow up hearing tales of how their grandfather and uncle were burned alive on the orders of the Mad King, the Targaryen king. Official peace and the temperature of the people's hearts are 2 different things. The North remembers. The Starks remember all too well. Let's put it all together. The Martells, with their resentment and patience. The Lannisters, with their wealth but no power. The North, with its memories and a silent reckoning. 3 heirs with competing claims. Daenerys without the hardening. Jon without a path through the Watch. Arya without the experience of a killer. the others without a countdown clock that ticks, but which no one in the South wants to hear. The Targaryen reign is not eternal. It is only as stable as the single, intelligent individual sitting on the throne. Rhaegar could have been a good king. His successors are not bound to be the same, and every source of tension we have listed is biding its time. Here's the full picture. In the canon, the rebels' victory came at a monstrous price. The Red Wedding, the Purple Wedding, the War of the Five Kings, Ned's death, Daenerys' childhood in exile, Jon's childhood, unaware of his origins. All of this is pain, real, undeserved, cruel. Martin shows the reader no mercy. But through that pain, he pushed the characters to the point where they became who they were meant to be. Arya became an assassin. Jon became a warrior who understood the nature of the others. Daenerys became a force capable of standing up to the darkness. Not because fate is kind, but because each of them followed the very path that made them useful at the right moment. Rhaegar's victory erases this pain. It erases most disasters. Westeros is gentler, calmer, more vibrant, but it remains vulnerable to a single threat that outweighs all human wars combined. A threat that cannot be stopped by gold, politics, or inheritance disputes. A threat that requires specific people with specific experience to face. And in peaceful Westeros, such people do not exist. This is where the author's perspective becomes key. Martin has repeatedly stated that his prophecies function as a double-edged sword. Those who believe in them destroy themselves through the very act of belief, by attempting to fulfill what might already have come to pass. Rhaegar believed in the prophecy of the Prince of Promise so much that, for the sake of this child, he destroyed the political stability of an entire continent. He risked everything for war, tens of thousands of lives lost, Aaliyah's family, the future of his own home. And behind all this lay the question, is a single child, a single potential savior, worth such a price? In the canon, Martin gave an indirect answer to this. Yes, he started the war in vain, because the others did not arrive as a result of the military conflict with the Targaryens. They came later, and they were only met because a whole host of people, shaped precisely by the catastrophes of that war and its aftermath, happened to be in the right places. Martin wrote precisely this story in which the Targaryens fell, not because the rebels were right, not because Robert was the better king, but because, through their downfall, he set in motion a chain of events that produced the right people. Rhaegar's victory would have halted that chain. It would have brought a calm, followed by a darkness for which no one was prepared. Rhaegar was a great prince, intelligent, educated, and ready for reform. He might well have been the finest king of the last 100 years, if not in the entire history of the Seven Kingdoms. Lord Barristan loved him. Jon Connington was prepared to sacrifice everything for him. Even Ned Stark, who understood that Rhaegar was responsible for the deaths of his father and brother, never spoke of him with hatred. Rhaegar was a rare sort of ruler, a man of both vision and conscience. It was a combination that Westeros had seldom seen. But vision and conscience are tools of governance, not a guarantee of eternal power. Tywin Lannister, too, had a long-term vision and ruled with iron efficiency. Jaehaerys I reigned for 55 years and died, leaving the Seven Kingdoms in perfect order. But after every great king came someone else. This is neither a curse nor a law of nature. It is simply life. One man cannot hold a system together forever. But the world in which he would have ruled would have lacked those who would stand against the Long Night. And the Long Night comes regardless of who sits on the Iron Throne. And winter, as every Stark knows, is always near. That is the bitter truth of this alternative. Sometimes victory in the right battle comes at the cost of defeat in a war that no one sees. Let us know in the comments which Westeros you prefer, the one ruled by Rhaegar or the one we know. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next analysis.